Thank you for being here. Alrighty. So we are called to order. During public comment, I don't think there's any public present. The June meeting minutes are recorded and put out there on PrimeGov for your listening pleasure. The first item is to review the Tulare County Water Legislative Platform. So we've attached that. Israel, do you want to go over kind of the board's process and frequency and sort of their vision for the platform as I think it's kind of changed over the years?
Yeah. So the board has adopted to update the platforms on a 2-year cycle to coincide with the state and federal legislative sessions. So rather than doing it every year like we used to, we're going to do it over a 2-year session. The platforms are designed so that the board, as issues come up throughout the year, can support, oppose, or comment on legislation or rules that are being submitted through some of the departments without having to go through the formal board agenda item process. So as they approve their position in one big tranche of legislative platforms, we then have the flexibility to comment as things come up without having to submit the agenda item and the 2-week deal and review by council and all that stuff because it's already taken care of. The aim is to be as broad or as general as possible so that we can be flexible in our advocacy. Sometimes we get stuck being too narrow, and then we're not able to use the platforms much at all because they only address a very specific issue. Mm-hmm. I do appreciate Denise's style of a quick assessment of what the issue or the challenge is, and then a list of solutions, and that really helps. There's some of the departments I'm always trying to cut down on the length of identifying the problem. I think we're all pretty well aware of what the problems are, and to be a little more solution oriented. The goal would be, and it looks like Denise is probably the first to bring up the idea of sponsoring legislation. Mm-hmm. So that's something that her and I
I have another idea, by the way. Yes.
So this style,
as my original problems may have fizzled a bit, depending on what council says about that. But yeah, there's some other ideas. And actually, I have an annotated version of this too. So I'll pull that up and then we can. But I'm sorry, keep going.
So the platforms as written sort of lend themselves to the idea of sponsoring legislation. Like we have a very specific fix, a very specific problem, we'd like a legislator to take that on to help us. So we're looking at maybe doing the first one that I've ever done on this side of the sponsorship deal. That used to be on the other side, the legislator side. And then just making sure all the facts and figures, numbers are up to date, as up to date as possible. We are going to be looking at doing a little bit of a layout design redesign to make it a little more palatable for people, draw your eye to the very specific things that we want. And then I've even considered maybe having like a more in-depth supplemental packet. If the legislator saw something on here, we get really quick and dirty with the challenge and with the solutions. They have a question about something, and I can pull a file and say, well, here's some of the background on that issue. Yeah. See if it sparks any action on their end. So that's the general idea. And Denise provides most of the feedback on that.
Yeah, so I wanted to give this group and then broader the Water Commission sort of the opportunity to weigh in on it. The number 4 is my other hats that I wear, so that isn't really pertaining to this group. But starting with number 6, I think the need is still there. I did add in the solution, in that second bullet point, mandatory consolidation.
Sorry for the interruption. Is this the Water Commission one?
Yes.
Yes.
For the private well, hi there. If you guys could sign in. Supporting legislation that provides for mandatory consolidation of private well communities. I was just going to highlight that because that still isn't an authority, correct, Jesse? They are only consolidating, state board only has authority to consolidate a water system into a water system.
Unless I believe there's a mechanism for private well residents to do a petition, I believe, to ask the state to
Yeah.
consolidate. So it's been a little while since I looked at SB88, but I think that.
Yeah, but it is a separate process. I don't know the specifics, but I think you might be right. I think it's a petition, but it is.
And it's a petition, and then can the water board mandate the consolidation, or can they just like support it?
I believe they can mandate it. I should probably check into
So
it.
that's just a question, because this has been a while since this was adopted, and so I'm not sure what, what the need is still. I know we've come a long way on like funding for private well communities, but there's still, I think, work to be done.
Yeah, and for the record, so to speak, I like the approach of basing a mandate on a petition by residents, because it does exactly what it sounds like, right? It establishes that there is a public desire for that
Right.
consolidation, which I think restricts the state board from, they haven't been going rogue with their mandates, but it restricts them from being able to do that, I think. But yeah, I'll read up on that before our full meeting.
And then I don't know if there was anything else on private well communities. I know Rogelio is something that in the GSA world, there's some impacts and how best you handle a mitigation program without proliferating a problem. I mean, we always try to consolidate and regionalize,
Yeah, I think especially for mitigation, because and then in the Tulare, we're identifying something that is considered because of Sigma related and things that we consider as legacy, right? So I think it's just making sure that all of those things are covered, because there are going to be impacts to negative wells that are not Sigma related, right? So prolonged drought, right? You just have age,
but they don't last forever.
infrastructure, right? It's just that wells are really old or really shallow. There's just a lot of different other circumstances that we can find. And then something that just us, because we have to look into where we're at, considering that we have, East Portville and Eastern Tulare GSA, we have to look at sort of every possible scenario and trying to see where we fit into all that. But, especially the long-term solutions and definitely consolidation. I think it's really going to be long-term going to be the biggest thing that we can support for those systems, or for, expansion of infrastructure to start connecting homes on private wells as well.
And I wonder if in this list of solutions, there should also, and maybe in the problem, we hadn't seen before until this summer, where the state had a bit of a budget crisis, and we saw the I don't know if we even call it an emergency response anymore, but like the private well assistance programs that are bridging the gap between now and a solution for individuals. If we also, I think we probably should call that out as well.
Interim solutions.
Yeah.
And I would push that a little farther to say, we're in a really unique moment right now where we are trying to continue providing support to residents as the GSAs at different speeds are preparing to assume some or all of that responsibility. And, you know, I don't know this for a fact, but that whole funding scare from this budget year at points felt like it was the state trying to push the responsibility prematurely onto GSAs. And that is only going to, well, A, make the state look like the tough guy, but B, put families in a really, really horrible position, and put service delivery agencies into a horrible position too. So, you know, this may be way too specific for this kind of a platform document, but I would love, you know, I think Tulare County has a lot to show in terms of our ability to coordinate these kinds of efforts. And I think we want to see more of that. Like, I want the state to support a transition, not a hard cutoff. So I don't know where that fits. But I think that, you know, if the county had the opportunity to come out and say, yeah, we recognize that the GSAs are going to be assuming a lot of this responsibility. We also recognize that they're all in different places. Let's not get ahead of ourselves here.
So how about if in the problem area, I mentioned something about funding being at risk for the interim solutions for private wells. And then I don't know how we say too soon or too fast, but
Maybe just thoughtful or well-planned transitions.
Yeah.
of-
so in the solution area, I say support local control and coordination of program transitions.
Program transition.
And I would also probably call out the management zones in that problem as well, because I feel like it's been both, right? It's been a shift to the GSAs and a shift to the management zones.
Mhm.
And then, you know, they struggled with like just basic infrastructure of like, we don't even know where to get all of this bottled water because we don't have, you know, the capacity, that our suppliers don't have capacity.
Exactly.
Right, and that's where we started because GSAs had a very specific purpose, right? It was basically regulation and implementation of Sigma. And we started saying, well, you need to be able to do this, you need to be able to do this, you need to be able to do this. And like a lot of GSAs are essentially district staff that are sort of filling in that role, or myself, where it's like one or two people, right? Essentially running this entire apparatus. So the ability to make the connection to be able to do those things is very important. Fortunately, we have, you know, like self-help, who that's, you know, one of their kind of new things would be to work with them to coordinate. Same with the management zone. They're doing water deliveries, you know, they're doing well testing. They're bringing in a lot of data to, again, those.
And one last thing I suggest adding, Denise,
Mhm.
is that most of, probably the state level, all of the assistance for private domestic wells is coming out of SAFER. And SAFER has passed its halfway point. It is going to sunset in 5 more years. So I think, you know, the efforts to renew SAFER are going to be growing, and I think the county might want to consider getting behind that.
That's a great segue, because number 7 is all about
Here's the
SAFER.
next one.
So I will add support the continuation of SAFER to our solutions below. And then I don't know for sure that the challenge is accurate anymore, because like we are receiving funding for East Arosi through SAFER for O&M, but I don't know how widespread that is. I know sort of the original vision of like having basically like a lifeline fund for sewer and water, that really hasn't come to fruition. And they're funding other things out of SAFER, like interim solutions, and which are all important, but that overarching need of O&M bridging. And this is where I'm throwing out potentially another sponsored piece of legislation. We're encountering significant issues with audits. The going rate is like $12,000. They're for 1 year. They're required to have one every year. For a community like Seville that has like 99 connections, when you take the $12,000 spread across 12 months, that's $1,000 per month spread across less than 100 residents. it's $100 per resident per month. Like it seems absurd. And so I don't know if we can legislatively put some sort of service center at the state board that's like, these are the auditors that are going to perform this on behalf of these tiny little districts that can't afford to meet the criteria. It's not really something that's supported in a technical assistance request, because if the choice is between technical assistance to deliver water or technical assistance to perform this $12,000 audit, they're going to do, I mean, I put in a technical assistance request for Terabella to do a rate study, and they came back and said, we have limited resources. We're not funding that. Good luck. And it's like, okay. So I don't know how you help communities, but they have to meet the audit requirements to get grant funding, and $12,000 a pop. And you have to have one every year. They used to, the old statute was like every 3 years, I think, or something. I know Paul Boyer always advocated for that, and then
And every 5 or 6 years, you have to switch auditor. Or it's spring.
And there aren't just that many willing to do the work.
I had issues finding an auditor this year for us.
Yeah.
And it's just, they're less and less firms are willing to do it now.
So I don't know if that fits in this O&M cost, because it is part of the ongoing cost, or if we have a separate bullet point for it, but that's definitely something I think that.
I mean, we're like supporting legislation just for like to assist with operational costs. Some of these smaller districts.
If the request had come in and I was asked to make a determination for the fellow within that point, I would say yes. I would think that the language is broad enough
Okay.
to suggest that, yes,
Okay.
sponsorship for piece of legislation is that.
Because that is the key too, right? Is to keep things broad enough that,
Yes.
because you never know.
It's super helpful if
Yeah.
we can come up with some sort of rationale to house it under one of these platforms.
Yeah.
Then it's more helpful to be able to do that than to have explicit line item things like this.
Because then you can start arguing about the specifics on it.
Right.
As opposed to leaving it broad enough to what the spirit of what we're trying to attain.
Yeah. And maybe that's where we have that background information of like, and here's an example.
Yeah, so
of-
the conversation that's being had right here would be great for like a white paper. Like
Mhm.
this is some of the issues that we're encountering, and if someone took interest and they could just pull us out of a file. I think that would look.
Yeah, almost, kind of thinking the same, just take this out, start shopping for
Yeah.
an office to take it on.
Yeah,
Sponsor.
Well, you asked if it fits in O&M, and I think it does, Denise, but I think it also fits in streamlined funding processes, because the exact same problem is getting in the way of communities being able to access grant funding. And that's what we've been trying to work on a little bit. What alternative form of financial review would the State Water Board and other funding agencies accept? Because I don't know if the answer is to fund full audits or if the answer is to reduce the requirement.
Or if the answer is to, create a statewide program where you're putting your financials into the system and it's spitting out the report that you need. And
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
right, like if it's just, if you're just asking ChatGPT
Yeah.
to certify your books, like, I don't know what it is, but it seems like in 2024, we should be closer than what could possibly go wrong. So in the safer component, I feel like some of these bullet points have made progress. I don't know if they're still accurate or if there's,
Are you still on 7?
yeah.
I mean,
I don't think the report is past due anymore.
right,
But
but
it's going to be, sunsetting.
right, the whole program will be sunsetting, SAFE will be sunsetting. They have, released several fund expenditure plans at this point, and there are plans in there for operations and maintenance. But I think you're right, Denise, that they're mostly going through the administrator program, and that if you're not assigned an administrator, I don't think you have much access to those O&M funds. And I also want to say that, there are two related but different problems in that challenge. One is assistance to ratepayers. The other is assistance for O&M directly to systems.
Gotcha.
And your statement that the program referring to AB 401, the program is past due is absolutely correct.
Oh, that's not accurate.
It's
Because
absolutely accurate.
okay.
Nothing has really happened. There've been lots of reports written, but nobody's put any money behind that. Nobody's figured out the right way to implement it. Federal government did a little bit, and they're doing some, the LIHEAP. That's money out of HUD, I think. And it wasn't done well during COVID. Nobody really benefited from it. At least none of the small systems did. So I think there's opportunity to support implementation of rate assistance programs in addition to O&M directly to communities, which, could work out to have similar benefits.
Yeah.
But as for the solutions, yeah, I think the first two bullets, those boxes have been checked, those tasks have been checked, the needs analysis is done. And safer monies are allocated to solutions that aren't eligible under other programs. I think the third bullet is eternal.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah.
And then do we
That's a
add
no-brainer.
into that third bullet the direct assistance to ratepayers, or is that a new bullet? Support?
I think it's a new bullet.
Okay, direct assistance to ratepayers. When does safer sunset?
27?
I can verify that.
28. No, it can't be that. It must be 28 or 29. The last bullet, I'm all for it. Seeing what County of Tulare has been able to do with the federal assistance funds with ARPA money. I think you've got an incredible track record to point to there. So I'm sure I see it happening anytime soon, but we can
We
still-
always like to
we can
ask.
support it.
Just write us a check, we'll make it happen.
Yeah. It's a block grant kind of a model, right? That's nothing new.
Mhm.
Right.
Okay, then on to number 8, streamlining the funding process. I point back to the audit report where it was called out that the state board wasn't getting the money out in time. I don't think I've seen an updated report, so I don't know if we still reference that this far out or if that section needs to be reworked.
They still reference it internally.
Okay.
So I think you can still
Okay.
reference it. They made some process improvements, but they're nowhere near done.
And is this where I should also highlight, just in the East Erosi project, we found, the audits were a stumbling block. The environmental's been a stumbling block, even though we have an expedited funding agreement, they're still not going to bless us to move to construction until all of those boxes have been checked. So I could call out a little bit more, maybe rework this and include more recent examples.
Yeah, they set up this expedited drinking water grant program, which sounded wonderful. And I'm not saying it hasn't been a good thing because we have advocated for funding to be committed earlier in the process because it just helps things keep moving. But they didn't really change the requirements.
Yeah.
They just moved them to the other side of the funding agreement, signature
Yeah.
date, right?
Yeah.
So it's not a streamlining. It may be an expedite to commit the funds, but it is not.
It's not an expedite to move to construction.
No.
It's just an expedite to get an agreement in place.
I would love to see real streamlining happen, expand CEQA exemptions for drinking water projects. somehow facilitate permitting across agencies, those sorts of things. And I don't talk about a white paper. That's what we need to write a white paper about, is like figure out what are the things we could ask to be implemented, but they've just been nibbling at the edges so far.
The next sentence there is that the report stated that more than 370 water systems in California are failing. The state would have updated numbers on that, correct?
The dashboard.
So maybe we don't reference the report itself, we just say X amount of water systems are failing.
Sure. Yeah, the safer dashboard will have updated info there.
Update from Tulare counties.
How many are we at now?
And I'm like, I feel like it's not gone the right way.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's what I said. How many are we at now?
Current rant is how long it takes them to produce a funding agreement, just to
Yeah.
produce the boilerplate contract. It's insane.
I mean, is it supporting legislation or is it supporting directive? Like who do you press on? I mean, I literally have a water board member calling me on a regular basis and she can't get the staff to
listen.
to move any faster.
It's the chief counsel.
Like if
answers all
a
of that.
supervisor called me and said, Denise, we need to do this today, I'd be like, okay, we will figure that
We'll
out.
figure it out.
But it's like,
Bureaucracy gets in its own way.
Yep.
yeah. Well, and I've spent 30 minutes on a call with the different divisions in the water board getting on the same page. And I'm like, y'all couldn't have done this on your own time. Like, I don't need to be privy to your interest. You guys decide what it is we're going to do and then let me know.
They called you as a facilitator.
Yeah, yeah, I guess it was our, I'm like, you're saying we don't have to do this, but you over here are saying we still have to do this. They're like, yeah, you do. Then don't complain to me about how much it costs to work with y'all because you just spent an hour of my time figuring your process out.
When it comes to, so I hate to take the cheap shot and blame the lawyers, but a big piece of this is the lawyers.
Yeah.
Their Office of Chief Counsel questions everything and provides zero guidance.
Yeah.
And the chief counsel himself seems to be some kind of king who answers to no one, except for the 5 members of the water board. And they don't seem to have been able to change the culture in that office. But the culture in the office very much seems to be protecting the state water board, which, okay, I understand how attorneys interpret that to be their one and only responsibility. But in an agency like the state water board, where they have this objective to meet the human right to water, the Office of Chief Counsel should be figuring out how to facilitate projects, not stop them.
Yeah.
And they stop them all the time.
Yeah.
And it just makes no sense to me. And I don't know how you change a culture like that when they don't really answer to anybody. But I feel like, fixing that could shave a couple of years off of some of our projects. Between consolidation agreements and funding agreements, those 2 pieces. I'm sorry, Paula, I really don't like to take cheap shots at lawyers.
No,
Paul always finds a way to help me do what I need to do.
yeah, but you were very clear that it wasn't any lawyers on your side. It's the water board lawyers. So you noticed I wasn't disagreeing with you.
I did not hear any protests. Yeah, that's true.
Right.
Trying to make sure I wasn't talking to you.
Yeah, exactly. No, I was not. I was with you in spirit. Let's just put it that way.
We're done.
Okay, so I added some stuff about supporting legislation to streamline the process to execute funding agreements and consolidation agreements. And then I'll update that problem statement with current numbers and some of the more recent examples of how things are not streamlined despite being called streamlined. The number 9 has been an ongoing challenge that we really haven't made any progress on. So basically, if somebody comes to our counter and says they are providing farm labor housing or employee housing, we have to approve it because we don't have enough units. But there's
I know
no,
about this person.
there's no requirement to provide that development provide safe drinking water. So in other situations, we'd have to get a will serve or some sort of plan to provide safe drinking water. In this instance, there's not.
Except if they are setting up their own public water system, that they have to get a public water supply permit from the state.
But we still have to approve the housing development.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
it's like we have to approve it and they are supposed to get a permitted water system, but there's no like enforcement. Like, you can't say no to the development.
What if,
And it's like, I've now had a lot of experience with our friends at HCD and it's I mean, talk about the water board. HCD is a whole place that could use a revamp.
for sure.
So how are these developments getting water to folks in private wells, just private wells?
Or like, I mean, even like an ag well on this site, just, I mean, it doesn't happen frequently. It's just, it's an area where we can't get ahead of the problem. Because if it comes in, we don't have a way to deny it based on water supply. Like, it's basically a rubber stamp, just
It's a rubber
a
stamp.
rubber stamp.
But just because it's just so needed, you start denying it based on that, you're gonna have a lot of problems.
Yeah. Specifically with farm labor.
With farm labor housing. And because farm labor housing is considered seasonal, temporary, it's, yeah.
Even though it's not really here, but
Yeah, I mean,
statewide
look
it's
at all of our
considered, yeah,
seasonal temporary communities that are now long-term
right.
communities.
Yeah.
Culture's changed.
Well, maybe, I mean, I don't know what the solution is there, but maybe we could expand, the options there to include things like, some kind of communication or cooperation between the drinking water regulating agencies, or DDW in this case, and the county? Or could you add a requirement that, yeah, we're approving this, but you have to do A, B, C, and D? I don't know.
That would be a sponsored bill that probably have a lot of possible debate.
Yeah,
But
it'd be interesting.
If it got that far. People, I feel like in both camps in the majority party, like there's a lot of concern to see both of those things.
Right.
Well, I think it's even part of the larger housing conversation, right? I
Yeah.
mean, the state is investing a ton of money in housing projects, but if you don't have water and sewer infrastructure, you can't build the houses where the houses are needed. And that's been an ongoing problem, and most of the housing programs either don't allow for that infrastructure to be built, or it's like we could do a CDBG construction grant for that type of infrastructure, but the process and the timelines are so compacted that it's like super risky to do it because you would never get it done in time, and then the state would claw the money back. Right? And then we're there.
Here you're dealing with a very specific population.
Yeah, and this one is, I mean, this one is one of those that's been very specific, but when you talk about the overall challenges in Tulare County, it's like, we're just proliferating the problem.
Right.
That someday they're gonna make somebody solve. So we either violate state regulation and deny the housing, or we approve the housing knowing that there's not a safe water supply.
Well, I don't think anybody would want to come out against this. I don't know if this is technically a by right, development thing. I don't think anybody's going to want to come out against the requirement that the county approve the housing development. So it feels like, to me, like the solution is, is additive. Like, yeah, we're gonna approve it, and we're gonna add this requirement, or we're gonna add this expectation, or we're gonna add this resource. Maybe those developers are required to, I don't know, get technical assistance when they're setting up their water system, or, something
Or
like that.
identifying.
Yeah.
Simply. There's some that are connected to a community, some have like a community well that can domestic, some they are connected to a BUD or a CSD just because of they're within there, but in the proximity, it really just depends, but we're talking about like in this case, outliers.
And you have a specific example, right? Yeah. And are they looking at the GSA to solve the problem?
Nope.
No.
Yeah, I was gonna say, at what point? Do you think the GSA?
Or the management zone?
Yeah, to solve a problem that the GSA didn't quite cause.
Yeah.
Well,
That'd be interesting.
Yeah.
It depends on what it depends on what the issue is. But that's why we're trying to develop a matrix. We're developing a matrix to kind of see where these things handle, so that whatever there is, there's a direction. Right. So
I kind of like that one. Have some tough conversations. Maybe it doesn't go anywhere, but you start a conversation. We have some legislators who sit down. Pretty key.
And I imagine I imagine it's a valley issue, right? Like I imagine, the 8 valley counties probably all have the same.
have this issue.
Yeah. Number 10, I think that one's resolved. I think they now allow for fire flow and hydrants.
They do.
Okay. So that one will pull off.
When you pull one off, can you just make note?
I'll just do a comment. I'll send you back track changes, I think is what, does that work?
And just like issues been resolved.
Yeah.
This is how. or
Yeah.
whatever. I have
Currently,
to
there's all
provide-
still
I have to provide
monitoring.
Justification why everything is.
Gotcha. That was always the challenge with this thing is like how much you change because every little, it's very clear to the person putting it together, but then when you take it back to the board, it's something completely different than what they had before. They're like, what did you do? Just made the sentences go right because like sometimes it gets revised so many times that then it's like, you can tell it wasn't written in one sitting.
Right.
Okay, so we have Sigma, and the challenge, I think, remains the same. I don't know, we can add additional to it. I did add a bullet point to say support local control through the probationary process and support a clear path to resolving the probationary status. Because I think right now there's not, what level of control is going to be available. And then how the heck do you get out of probation is still unclear.
Right.
I am going to be discussing with the CAO's office about a local control item in and of itself.
Okay.
I feel like that's a pretty big umbrella that could
Yeah.
advocate a lot of things.
Because that would be pretty much any agency.
And it sounds like your suggestion it's a two-part, local control and secondary issue.
Yeah, or maybe that's even a separate bullet point is like, tell us how they get out of probation.
Yeah.
Right now, probation's a bit of a black hole. You just go in and you don't know where you get out. Yeah.
Come out. But I mean, the feedback we've gotten is that they would want GSAs and subbasins to come out of probation, but how you go about that hasn't been really well defined either. So that's what we're trying to do as much as we can now prior to make sure that we don't and still do what we need to be
So I don't know if there's additional solutions that need to go in or additional challenges, as this was written, several years ago. I might add something about how many subbasins we have facing probation.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the challenge still feels pretty accurate to me. Both of the solutions, though, seem a little overly specific.
Yeah.
So we might want to just sort of broaden the lens on,
Yeah.
on the solutions to talk about, flexibility in funding, and local control over what we decide to do with land.
I can try to pull up some language I
Okay.
developed, for that one. I mean, it's just kind of really say that some, projects that support, sustainability or more sustainable practices so that it's not so specific, but
Yeah.
It's kind of language that we've used when we talk about sort of the overall water budget for the subbasin.
Mhm.
Or encouraging sustainable practices, because if we can engage in sustainable practices, we can protect, ag in other, in parts of the subbasin, as long as we come in balance. I mean, that'll include things as well as bringing in surface water. But specific to Sigma and reducing groundwater pumping, more better land use.
And Israel, I have engaged Land IQ to, what they're going to do is use their data set that they have to put together some scenarios as far as land valuing go.
Yep.
So that we can start to run some scenarios on the county's general revenue side. Because that's something that's been a big mystery, like how do you kind of guess what the impacts could be? So I don't know that what was your timeline on adopting this?
The end of January next year.
Okay, so that, it might just coincide with that. So I think I've put together an agreement, or I'm waiting on maybe a work plan to do the agreement. But that's sort of what I had asked for, like if we could run the initial scenarios like the end of this year. Because then that will start to inform more of the county's, stance on Sigma and what the impact, the true impacts
Yeah.
might be.
Once you start having a lot of areas pulling out their trees and vineyards and everything, that's when people really start feeling it. Whenever we've had, especially with the ORP, when we've had outreach, that's one of people's concerns. So obviously there's concerns about water and walling, but then it's like, they realize, but a lot of people in town work here. So
Yeah.
if that all goes away, what happens?
And there's a bill right now that's prohibiting warehouse expansions. And it's like, okay, if they're not working in warehouses and they're not working in fields, then Where?
Packing houses closed.
yeah. We've seen a shift, I feel, locally to more logistics, warehouses, especially in the cities, it's moving a little away from straight agriculture support functions, but.
I remember in 1560 during the drought, I was roaming around the county, a lot of these small single school districts lost a lot of ADA because there was no work and their parents had to pull kids from school, gotta go somewhere else.
Yeah.
So. I
Some
mean,
of our
that's-
rural communities are a few students away from like not having lots of
Yeah.
school. It's really bad.
Well, even doing like our community analysis for where we have to do some reports of waste discharge for the small sewer systems that the county
Yes.
has. And from 2010 to 2020, the census numbers, I mean, the population is declining and it's like, okay, when does this no longer become a
A
viable
viable
community?
community. It'd be
Yeah.
sustainable when the ratepayers can't afford to maintain the system
Mhm.
because there's not enough of them.
Downstream effects of that. Schools are predominant. They serve as information hubs. which
Absolutely.
Get information out to the kids about service
Yeah.
programs, and things like that, things that are happening and changing in the community, funding opportunities that are available to people in the county. Like you go through the schools and the school's not there. You have an information desert that you have a problem. Keep people up to date on stuff.
So maybe we can put a little bit more meat around, Sigma's now been around for 10 years, and these are the current impacts. This is the projected impact, and then the solutions.
Yeah.
to the warehouse. We are sending a letter to the governor today to try to veto that, or asking to veto that.
Oh, yeah.
Because the packing warehouse issue is such a huge issue, like it preventing us from putting packing houses where they belong. Just
How do you,
Right.
how are you wanting to get your food, state of
Yeah.
California, just like on a branch? Like, not in a package, not just in a bag from the field, like just here you go.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Crazy. And I just wonder like I mean, it's gotta be like large metropolitan areas
Yeah.
that just don't want,
Yeah, no, it was surgery with a hammer.
Yeah.
We got caught.
No, that's always been the case. It's just that, in regards to the representation, this area, I mean, it's just, it's really difficult.
okay, number 12, water supply south of the Delta. But this is something, I mean, I guess probably because we've been having wet years, although the allocation still is not a full
Not optimal.
allocation.
Yeah.
But this is something that I personally have it dropped off my radar. So I know that there is some work still on conveyance through the Delta. I don't know what the current status is. And then what we've kind of always asked is that the water board interprets with maximum flexibility the water quality standards in the Delta to allow for water deliveries.
We'll have our letter going out to the Bureau on the coordinated long-term plan for the CDC
Yeah.
in the city, probably on the 6th. If your organization's interested in signing on, the deadline's tomorrow. We got Fresno, Kings, Kern, Madera,
Close the business for, right?
Closets, have all signed on. The Eastern Farmers League has signed on, Tulare County Farm Bureau. I think East Korea is gonna sign on. So the coalition's growing, and it's the same old water. And I can send you a copy.
Sure, totally interested to read it, yeah. I mean, this is not my area of expertise, but allow me to speak anyway. I would add that part of the challenge, and maybe this is already here, is just that surface water is important to add operational flexibility for municipal water systems. I mean, I increasingly feel like for rural communities to be sustainable, they need to have flexible sources of water, much like growers do. And yeah, so I that's another reason why I think, what we could cite that we support better supply south of the Delta.
That was gonna be something on now too, is the availability to allow for surface water. Community municipal use. Look at Terabella.
Or Lindsay,
Fresno.
Lindsay.
Yeah, Lindsay. I mean, all these cities and communities that are able to get water from a surface water supply, reducing the need for.
Well, even like Okieville, where they're not receiving surface water, TID is doing upgrading at recharge, which then allows for, the better water supply and replenishment, yeah.
Pixley is doing the recharge basin right outside of Tenston as well.
Right.
So, the ability to bring, and that's water coming out of the creek from Deer Creek. So the ability for allowing for projects to bring in surface water and recharge.
Yeah.
Around communities.
I think I'll add that to the second challenge where we talk about sustainability, fostering resilience, surface water supplies and conveyance must be improved, and then surface water provides. I'll add that note about the flexibility and opportunity.
That makes perfect sense.
Okay.
Is it Brian Kern Canal fix still?
Well, I think that one's done,
They
right?
accomplished what they need to accomplish.
Wait,
The
Right
Bryant,
now.
the fifth, Bryant Canal fit.
Is that anybody?
Is there anything else in the solutions that needs to be added? We talked about flexibility, increasing flows, and then storage, Bryant Kern Canal,
Storage and conveyance.
and conveyance. Okay. And then wastewater. I think this one still stands, although there are some bills in right now about yeah, to consolidate. I don't know, haven't seen if it.
So it really became just about an administrator to wastewater systems? Maybe 805?
Yeah, but it says it's also, what's Rule 77 suspended? Well, then it went to engrossing and enrolling.
Yeah, urgent, it might have to do with the urgency clause.
Yeah, it does look like it's just administrator.
Administrator. Also authorize state board to order designate to accept. So this is really just for administration.
Well, it's providing the same authorities that drinking water administrators have.
Right.
It doesn't really get to the consolidations
I
that.
think it changed. I think those are amendments.
Yeah,
I haven't followed that one closely, but.
so I think this, and then I can add the, whatever happens out of the 805 language.
I mean, I definitely still agree that we need emergency funding for sewer emergencies. And I would also say that it's been frustrating that currently the state is really only offering funding for septic to sewer conversions and consolidations. If you have a wastewater treatment plant that you've had since 1955 and it is, held together with duct tape, good luck, like here's a bigger roll of duct tape. There's,
Yeah.
they just never fund upgrades ever.
That's what I was gonna request is language for supporting upgrades. We just, some of the sewer systems in some of the communities, they've just been around forever. And they're barely holding, and I think even the economic development of some of those towns has been contingent on both the ability to provide water and sewer.
You're absolutely right.
Early mark.
Yeah.
Speaking of
Adequate. So support, well, honestly, and Sherman and I were talking about this. Sherman's our assistant director over fiscal and admin, and I guess I was grouchy yesterday. And he's like, you're just not interested in solving the world's problems today. And I was like, look, to solve the world's problems, we need a regional wastewater treatment facility in the North County and a regional wastewater treatment facility in the South County. That would solve a lot of problems.
Yes.
But you don't have the appetite of the cities to take that on, because you would need the cities to be part of that regional wastewater program. But the drinking water stuff is so much easier to solve
Yeah.
than the
Then
wastewater.
the waste and
I'm doing these
sewer.
reports of waste discharge for like Traver and for Delft Colony, and it's like, we're gonna spend a ton of ARPA money to dredge out the sludge of, 30 years of sludge in the treatment ponds. And, hopefully we can keep them doing the biological thing for long enough. And luckily it doesn't look like we're having to do nitrate removal, but if we had to do nitrate removal, like, who's paying for that? And like on such a small scale, and yeah, it's miles to the next system, but if each of those systems has to do the same thing, like it just needs to be a big regional thing, and we're just not there. But can I put that, like, support regional wastewater facilities to have economies of scale?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's the answer.
Or adequate, because I don't want to say upgrades, because it's not really an upgrade, it's just
Right.
bringing it
In some
into,
cases, just
like,
having one.
compliance, yeah. Okay. And then do we also should we also add something about, well, adequate funding for DACs to consolidate? That's funding. Should we also say something about adequate authority for consolidations, or? Because right now it's just the small, like, the have-nots knocking at the door and begging the haves to take them in. There's no path to, like, make it happen.
Well, I mean, the SB 1215 tried to set up a path. It just didn't put much funding or
Yeah.
behind it. So
And that's kind of the difference between the regional board and the state board, right? Because the regional board is just like,
I think they're kind of under-resourced.
Yeah.
They've got like 2 people assigned to this program, and those 2 people have been doing, all they can to coordinate consolidations and get the cities interested and all of that, but they just don't have very many resources.
Mhm.
And I think they have the authority to mandate, but they don't have the
The money to
resources.
do it.
They don't have the money to do it, and they don't have the money to defend themselves when the very first mandated consolidation is challenged in court. At least that's how it's been explained to me. So I think maybe the framework is there, but it needs enhancement.
Okay, then maybe that's sufficient language. Israel, I can't tell, but I think maybe the next I don't know, this one's just regular water, so is this the state, is the state, okay, I was gonna say, this looks like federal.
Yeah, they were all combined. Well, they're not combined, but I combined them.
Yeah, into one thing, okay, so the next section is our federal platform, because we still are adopting 2 separate. Thanks guys for coming. So I feel like the success reservoir, well, the project itself is funded annually. But there's been this ongoing discussion, and I don't know if it's still a discussion for the water agencies that use Success Water, but like dredging success. I don't know if that's still something that should be included, because this is what it says, is it should be dredged regularly, but.
I can have Townsend ask the engineer.
Okay.
And see if it's stuff.
And he sits on the strat committee, so he might know, okay.
I'll ask.
And then we have this is subsidence on the Frank Kern. Do we still need the feds to appropriate funding?
I think it,
Okay. Well,
give more money.
all right, we can leave that. The dry well piece is specific to USDA. Do they still have that funding, Jesse? Okay, and it's still the $11,000.
I believe so. I don't think
Okay.
that's increased. Yeah.
I don't know if we're still 400% of that
Instead
amount.
of 11,000, but would that be like $50,000? Yeah.
And then the next are about forests. So we got through it. And I know we're over time, so thanks for sticking to it with us. Is there anything that's not in the platform that should be added?
Like a subtopic?
Yeah.
No, I think pretty much from what I see, I think anything we can think of would fall into any
One of the ones that
one of,
covered it.
yeah, any one of these. Because I think it addresses a lot, especially on the infrastructure side.
So I know you have nothing to do between now and September 17th. It's just, you're basically just, knitting and things, making daisy chains.
Watching Amazon.
Yeah. On a good Netflix binge.
Yeah.
But if there are other things that come to mind oh, hey, we didn't think of this, or I forgot about this, like, just send it over to me and I can incorporate it in. I'm gonna try to package this up for the meeting on Monday, and at least let the commissioners also like take a bite of the apple.
Sure, yes.
So, yeah. Okay.
So,
I can't be at Monday's meeting. I'm so
Okay.
sorry. I'll be out of town.
Stantec is gonna come and tell us about all the fun they're having in Teviston and their pending appointment in Ellensworth.
Partial skip at Ellensworth.
It is a partial, but I had coffee with them on Friday morning because they had a community meeting in Teviston Thursday night.
Right.
And by name, it's a partial scope administrator, but really what they're asking them to do is like full scope. But somehow allowing the Allensworth CSD board to have some input, but I was asking about like contracting, like, are you signing the contracts or are they signing the contracts? Because if they can't get a quorum together, like, that's been part of the ongoing issue. That was sort of I think it's the first limited scope administrator in the state, so
It is.
oh,
it's an interesting.
So nobody really knows.
literally, how it's gonna.
Well, and it's like, what are they asking you to do? Well, they're basically asking us to do everything,
Right.
but I guess the water board, still respects that CSD board, whereas I don't think they've cared about anybody else to this point.
They brought it back.
Card.
Yeah, well, and that's what I was like, Allensworth is great to work with because they have a lot of ideas, but they sometimes struggle to accept kind of the cobblestoned ideas. Like, I know that the overall goal is this, but like, we can't get there today. We have to go here and go here.
Oh, I see, yeah.
They said they have a hard time with that. Like, they just ask for everything and then like, maybe if you'd ask for a piece of that.
Mhm.
And one thing that's not in here, and I don't know where it might fit in, so maybe think about it, is the idea of solar for water and sewer systems. So one of the biggest expenses for a water system or a sewer system is the power bill.
Oh,
So you think you're running pumps and motors constantly in the summer months, especially on the water system, and then sewer systems, like the aerators need to run. And so if you could, I think Celeste was saying like for Gedimine's a bill, like in the summer, it's like a $4,000 or $5,000 bill.
yeah.
In 1 month, if you could do some sort of solar array and even
With battery storage.
with battery storage or even a power purchase agreement that gives you a lower rate.
Mhm.
While like in Allensworth, battery storage to alleviate the two power systems that burn up their system on a regular basis. But I don't know where that might.
Well, it fits into sustainability of
Yeah.
water systems, so maybe it fits into the, not as it's currently labeled, but this number 7, the sustainable operation and maintenance revenue streams, maybe that needs to be relabeled to be broader sustainability of small water systems. And then, alternative power sources could be one component of that sustainability. There aren't very many small communities that have solar on their utilities, their water utilities, but Planada does on their wastewater treatment plant. And how did they do that? There was a brief blip of, what did they call it? The state water board had like green infrastructure financing or something. And Planada in Merced County managed to get some of that. And it's amazing. They have almost no power bill to run their wastewater treatment plant. And they have this beautiful battery system. It's huge. It's like the size of a semi-trailer. And it's great. It saves them tens of thousands of dollars.
And as we transition into more and more communities having to bringing on additional treatment, like, I don't know how many communities are having to do 1, 2, 3 TCP treatment.
Yeah.
Like at least 3 or 4 that I know of, and probably more, like that all takes.
You know, what's do a lot of it is schools, school water systems. A ton of schools seem to be coming up with TCP. And they're gonna have to operate these little bitty treatment plants and push water through a filter.
So we need to educate our children, feed our children, clothe our children, and now treat the water.
Yeah. That's fine, right?
I'm just thinking my husband, well, at least they're on the CSD, but I'm just thinking my husband, he's the best school bus driver. He's gonna add like, water treatment system operator to his resume.
Resume, there you go.
Yeah, he already does like, he mows the grass and then he drives the bus
Oh,
and
yeah.
then, fixes the sprinkler system and then drives the bus again and.
Yeah. The small school district, yeah, usually
You
the
do, yeah.
bus driver is also the handyman,
Yeah.
it just,
And
yeah.
promoted out from like the backup custodian, like
Backup.
somebody else lower on the food chain has to go unclog the sweater out of the toilet.
Go out in the cafeteria for lunch.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you guys.
Are there any, I know that this is the moment of, like, bills have generally passed or not, and then the governor is considering signing. Are there any that we are contemplating sending, some signing letters to the governor about?
I don't know, I don't think we've done,
The only one that we had to follow up on, I believe from the last legislative subcommittee, was 460, if we were still in opposition. And my understanding was that the bill had been amended to have removed a majority, if not all of the opposition. The other difficulty is I got an email late yesterday from our lobbyist that said that the governor is requiring position letters within 3 days of the poll. So,
so we're already past that. So
We're already past
most of
it.
these were enrolled on the
well,
27th or the 30th.
I'm assuming that sent to engrossing and enrolling is not the enrollment date,
Okay.
and that there's a separate enrollment
Yeah,
date,
there's an enrollment date.
because that seems ridiculous.
Mhm.
And so I was gonna look into, I think each bill has a unique enrollment date, depending on when it went into engrossing and enrolling. So we may have a window of maybe like, but
And the last day for him to sign is the 30th.
I believe so.
Feels like most of it gets done like right in the middle of September,
Yeah,
like right around my birthday. Like I think Sigma got signed like on my birthday. It's just like the gift that's.
It probably
that's
was.
the gift that keeps
I was
on
there.
giving. Yes.
That's beautiful.
It did go into September
Mhm.
session, did go into September.
Okay, well, if there aren't any bills that we've been tracking so intensely that, they're coming immediately to mind, then there probably aren't any that justify letters, but
And there wasn't,
there is.
on the water side this time, I don't feel like there was much like gut and amend as there has been in previous sessions where all of a sudden at the 11th hour, something
Not water.
wild.
There's some aggressive
There's some
demands
other
this year,
ones,
but wasn't in water.
Yeah. So. Alrighty.
Great. Thank you. That was
Thank you guys for coming. That was a really great session we had. I really appreciate it.
I like doing it this way.
Yeah.
It's just like, hey, let's talk about it and throw
Yeah.
the ideas out there. I like that.
I agree.
I'll be in. Oh, that one's all right, I think that's it.
Bye.
Bye, Miss.
Bye,
Paula.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paula.
Thank you.